Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be re-lent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a micro-lender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
So today I am with Gina Trimarco Klauder. She is a leadership strategist and international best-selling author who uses improv-inspired decision-making to help people overcome analysis of paralysis. In her new book, The Choice of Effect, the New Choice of Effect, she blends neuroscience, which I love, behavioral research, and real-world experience to show how quick, courageous decisions can unlock clarity, confidence, forward motion in life and in work. Gina, it has been a while. How are you, my friend?
I am awesome, Gerald. It is so great to be with you, and I am so excited because of our creative backgrounds. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Excellent, excellent. When you reached out to me and I saw the new book, I was like, Gina, I can help you more than just giving you an endorsement, which I will on the book, but I can help you by bringing you on my show and just having a great conversation. Because, when I hired you as my coach, you gave me some strategies between yourself and Jeb Blount, gave me strategies. And in fact, your introduction of Jeb Blount's content through Sales Gravy and all the things that I learned from that, and then going to Atlanta to a conference with Jeb.
To Outbound, the Outbound conference.
And Jeb taking interest and then introducing me to Wiley, they published my third book.
I know.
And it was because of my relationship with you that I met you, that introduced me to Jeb, that got this thing done. So I was like, I got to return this favor. I mean, there's no way I can overpay you for what you've done for me.
Thank you.
What I've learned from you and so on. So being able to have you on the show and us talk about this book, which is that's the kind of book I would want to write, that really falls in my wheelhouse of neuroscience, behavioral things. And that's why I was like, okay, I got to have you on the show to talk about this because it is so up my alley of what you've done. And so, but before we get started, I always have to ask, I guess, a couple of questions. And is, what is your favorite style of music?
Oh my gosh, my favorite style of music. That's such a hard question because it depends on my mood of the day. If I had to default, it would be 90s club music.
Okay.
That's my first go-to. If I'm like trying to hype myself up, it's 90s club music.
Yeah. Well, in my second book, Workplace Jazz, I write about the root word of music is the word the muse.
Oh, yeah.
And it puts us in a trance and it gets us to change our state. So music is an amazing way to change your state. If you're feeling funky or whatever, put on some good music, or you need to focus and get clarity, put on some classical. It'll change your state and allow you to focus or move into that new area. Do you have a favorite artist or band from that period?
I can't remember any of the names of the bands. The first one that comes to mind is Enigma. I was a club girl. I'm not going to say when I graduated, but I was dancing in the clubs in the late 80s, early 90s.
Gotcha. Well, listen, let's talk about your book again, because, that's why I brought you on. A few reasons, right? Obviously, like I said, you have made a big impact in my life just with your skills, your thought process, your training skills, and your improv skills. And I can relate so much to that as being a musician. And as I went through your book, I was just really in awe of the amount of research and behavioral patterns, but also I was really impressed with your vulnerability, because you share a lot of very, vulnerable, personal things in the book about yourself. And I think I think it's going to do really, really well, because people can relate to someone who's normal, who's human, who has, things weren't perfect for you. You didn't have the perfect family. You didn't have the perfect marriage, or you didn't have the perfect start, but you did what you did in the book, which is improvise and use those skills and realize you kind of over time. Steve Harrison talks about stumbling forward. Steve Harrison helped Jack Canfield get Chicken Soup off the ground. And he always talks about sometimes you just got to stumble forward in life, but you still got to move forward, right? And in your book, that's what I see, is that you took every situation that happened and you just kept moving forward. What was the thing about you that compelled you to write this book at this time?
Well, anybody who's written a book, right? It's like, get the book out, get the book out. There's a couple different reasons. Like for 10 years, it started out as the bucket list item. And then, as you progress through your career and you get more knowledgeable and people look up to you more, and you're like, oh, what, really? I don't see myself that way. But the more experience you get, people see that. And then people started saying, do you have a book? Do you have a book? Yes. And I'm like, one day it's coming. And I would get stuck. I got stuck on, I wanted to be about improv, but I wanted to be approachable and accessible. And part of the problem with improv is sometimes I feel like people don't take it seriously as an emotional intelligence skill, which I've coined the term improvised intelligence.
Yes.
And people don't take that as seriously. So I started to write that book, Improvised Intelligence, and then it started to feel too heavy.
Yeah.
And I kind of got stuck in my tracks. And then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to make a new choice. And I'm going to write from my heart and my soul, because every time I have a speaking engagement, the speaking engagements that seem to resonate the most is when I tell a vulnerable story. Yeah. And that actually surprised me, because I try to come all knowledgeable. And then when I tell a personal story, there's a line of people wanting to talk to me. And that really hit me. And I'm like, why am I trying to write a business book? Yeah. Why don't I try to write a life book that people relate to, and then I can create some validity around it with the research and with the neuroscience, because I'm a neuroscience geek on behavior and why people do the things that they do. And I'm like, how do I take all of that, the neuroscience, and kind of validate improv and why it is so valuable? And then I'll use my real life stories. And I'll tell you, Gerald, it was a big risk, because I got to make a confession right now, because I got to make a choice. My 18-year-old stepson is a Christmas gift to me, who's in college, just started college. His Christmas gift to me was a college-style paper called A Critical Review of the New Choice Effect. And I haven't read it yet. And I'm going to read it when we're done here, because I'm seeing him tonight for dinner, and I'm like, I got to get this over with. But a critical review sounds a little bit scary, but I write about him in the book, and I didn't really get his permission, right? So I put a lot of stories out there that are personal and vulnerable, and the reaction to it has been phenomenal and not what I expected.
Yeah. I think the reason why it hits home, right, is that we're in this age of AI and something called RAG, which is retrieval augmented, being able to get access to data. And you can go into AI and type a prompt and get all the facts, get all the figures, get all the research. But here's what AI can never do. AI can never be human and tell a human story that impacts our emotions or impacts our mirror neurons, with mirror neurons that you talk about in the book. And that's something that we're impacted by seeing and interacting with another human being. Even animals have mirror neurons, and that's how pups learn how to be dogs, right? Because they watch their doggy parents, and they imitate and do what they do through the idea of imitation, which is mirror neurons. But we also can relate and connect with each other through those mirror neurons. If I'm smiling, you smile, right? Or if I'm happy, you bring that into a room, and everyone in the room gets happy, or at least has some semblance of that.
Right.
And I think when you share the areas of your life that are really vulnerable, it really has an impact on people, and it touches people from a humanistic standpoint. So I think you did an amazing job.
Thank you.
Of sharing stories that really do touch, but you also then related it to the science. You did a really good job of interweaving the science and the research and the stories, so that you're not bored. You're kind of on the edge of your seat listening to, like, oh wow, what happened next? Oh my goodness, oh my goodness.
I've had a couple people say that to me, that it felt like it was like a pow and a pow and a pow.
Yeah, because you just keep going. It's not keep going in a bad way. It's
right.
It's keep going in an amazing, thriller, right? Where you're just telling your story of what happened in your life, and and I love the way the book is written, because you start off and you kind of, it's almost like a really good movie where they start the movie off and it shows like how the movie's going and what kind of happens at the end, but you don't know the how. And then through the rest of the movie, the story unfolds and you get to the how. And then you see the transformation, and you see how it went from that first scene to that last scene, and you're going, well, what happened in the middle? And I think that's what really brings the book to life and makes it something that you really want to engage with, which I thought was amazing.
Thank you. And I, going back through, as you know, have been written 3 books, the process of writing was not nearly as challenging as the process of editing and editing. And editing and seeing the next version. I'm like, how many times do I have to read my own book? And remembering, like, I would start a story in one chapter, but maybe not finish the story there because it didn't relate to that chapter, right? And so some of that was intentional too. I'm like, oh, I'll expose the rest of that story in another chapter.
Yeah,
they don't know it yet.
That's what I noticed. See, you leave open hooks. So you start a story, you don't finish it, you go into the research, you're like, well, what happened? And then it's the next chapter or the few chapters over that you actually close that loop, but then you open a few others. So you keep these open loops and you close them, so you're not just frustrated because you not know what's going on.
That's awesome.
But they're closed, but then you've opened a few others, so you're like, okay, now I want to know what happened over here. And how did that end up? And how did that change? And what happened there? Let me ask you this. How can professionals use this concept of improv, right, to deal with the challenges that they're facing? I mean, right now, between the AI layoffs, between the globalization, between, the government shutdown and the government cutbacks, and then just all of the impacts of decisions folks have made that are coming, right? Some of them are already here, and some of them are coming, and it's going to have a big impact on all of us in a lot of ways. How can we use this improv mindset to deal with this?
You hit on a lot of important things that are happening, and what that is to me is decision overload and overthinking, and not just overthinking. It's like over pre-thinking. Like, I have to start thinking ahead of what if, and people are spending so much time in the what if, and I do it too. Yeah. And when you spend so much time in the what if, you can't live in the now and in the moment and just take the next step. Now, there's something we refer to from an improv performance standpoint, and I call it follow your feet. And what this is when I see some of my performers, and I'm constantly coaching them on this, when they get stifled at the edge of the stage. So like improv, it's an ensemble, and you got to be able to jump on and off the stage to actually support your partner and help them when they get stuck. And I'll see literally physically a performer stand at the edge of the stage, and their entire body is moving, and their feet are planted. And their feet want to move, but their head won't let their feet move.
Right.
And they're stuck there. And I'm like, just move. And they're like, but we don't know what to do. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. If you move, something will happen.
Right.
And so we have to get out of this overthinking and being stuck. Now, a lot of people like me with improv backgrounds and improv in business, everybody is familiar. Most people are familiar with the yes and philosophy, the yes and phrase, right? Yes and is about acceptance of ideas, not negating ideas or offers. It's being open-minded to creating and collaborating. And that's a big part of what this improv piece is being open to collaborating and validating others. What is not talked about enough is yes-anding ourselves, meaning listening to ourselves, listening to our own intuition and our own thoughts and our own feelings and fears and desires, and validating ourselves and moving, even if we're collaborating alone. So that's the yes and concept of it. It's been around a long time. But earlier you asked me about, what was kind of the motivation. I had gotten stifled. A lot of people have writer's block, right? And so I was sitting watching one of our shows. I was watching my performers. I was in the audience there to support them. And they started playing the New Choice game. It's a game that we've played for almost 20 years. And as I sat and I watched them play New Choice, I'm like, that's the book. How can I translate this to the average person, how to get out of analysis paralysis? Because when you play New Choice on stage and you and I are going back and forth and a director is saying, Gerald, new choice. And everything you say, that director keeps showing, Gerald, new choice, new choice, new choice. And you have to keep changing what you say until you don't hear new choice anymore. And by the third or fourth response, that wasn't anywhere near your first response,
right,
that scene goes in a completely different direction because you were forced in the moment to just go with your gut.
Yeah.
And to go with your first thought. And so I think what happens is we're socialized and conditioned to not do that, right? Because that feels a little too intuitive. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but throughout my career, I've had bosses say to me, you just make too many decisions based on your intuition. Mm-hmm. And so I stopped doing it. Yeah. And shame on them, because my intuition is usually 99% correct because I'm pretty intuitive, because I am, emotionally intelligent and observant. Now, what I did learn and take away from that was, all right, Gina, you're probably right.
Yeah.
But you need to convince them with facts.
Right.
Which is kind of how I do this book. I can't just say, oh, improv is great. I got to back it up with facts and science. And now what's interesting about that, because there's not a lot of science around there on the improv piece, I've got some doctors in my local community who have come to me to ask me to be part of a research project to study the effects of improv on stroke patients.
Oh, wow.
We're getting a grant for that to start doing that research, which is really cool because what got them inspired by that is they saw one of my performers who's a stroke patient who came back to perform after his stroke. He's not 100% himself, but he is funny and witty, and he gives all the credit to improv.
It has a lot. I mean, there's so much to unpack with everything you just said there, but just the whole situation with the stroke patient, by making that new choice, right? We started working together after my vertigo situation, and I remember sharing that with you. And, what's really cool, which, we were kind of catching up before we started our recording here, but one of the other things that did happen this year is I had to do some things with my business and I needed to get some insurance stuff. So I needed to do a new EEG so that they could, approve me for some additional things, setting up. And I was able to go in and get a medical EEG done. And they were able to say, Mr. Leonard, after all that you've gone through, we don't see any residuals of the vestibular imbalance, and we don't see any of the residuals of the vertigo. That through your new method, our lifestyle, our meditation and yoga, and all the things that you're doing, you've reversed the effect of that. But here's what I learned in doing, and as I went through this journey, I studied neuroscience, I studied kinesiology, I studied epigenetics from Dr. Dawson Church and a lot of his books. And what I learned was that our mental, physical, social, and emotional environments will either turn on or turn off genes.
Wow.
So if we put ourselves in a place, because you talk about this in your book about the environment of your home, the environment of your life, the environment of your friends, if we put ourselves in a place where we have the right environment, it will turn off the bad genes or genes that will create diseases, and it will turn on healthy genes that will create possibilities. And so by this gentleman putting himself in an improv class, he changed his environment, which signals to the genes to turn on the placebo, to turn on that effect of getting better and healing. And even though as I was going through my journey, I wasn't initially healed, but by going down that road of learning and changing the environment, I went through the healing process.
Yeah, and you probably went through it faster and better.
Yes.
Right?
And that's what's happening to this gentleman that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, even for us at the theater, because he had been part of our team before the stroke.
Right.
And, then he was gone for quite some time, like learning how to walk, right? All those things. Right. And then he kept coming back to me saying, I want to be involved. And I had to try to wrap my head around this. Like, we've always made accommodations. And I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to make an accommodation here to get him on and off the stage. And he can't move very fast. And right, we had to get really creative as a team to make space for him to be part of it. And it's just amazing. Like, I get emotional thinking about it because he's got to be the funniest guy of the whole team.
Right.
Because I think he's funnier now after the stroke. Yeah. He's just, his wit, like, he's slow to respond, which could be part of his issue.
Yeah.
But that slowness, which I've always talked about, like, introverted people I think are better improvisers and funnier improvisers because they are slow to listen. They're listening.
Right.
And they're paying attention and they're observing. And then out of nowhere, they open their mouth and what comes out is so brilliant. You're like, where did that come from?
Right.
And everybody now just like leans in when he's about to talk because it's like, what's the brilliance that's going to happen next with him? And yeah, I'm in awe of him.
So that's kudos to you for creating the environment for him to thrive, because you're not only allowing him to express himself from a improv standpoint, but you've allowed him to be in a place where he can begin to, facilitate his healing. And that is a big part of that process, is just being around people who, no matter what you're going through or where you're at in life, having people around you who will support you through the journey means more than anything else. It means more than any money you can make. It means more than any accolades that you can receive, knowing that you have people who are supporting you through this journey that you're going through, because then if they're willing to make accommodations, as you would say, for me when I'm limited, that means that they're real people, right? They're real. And then for, if you're listening and you're going through something, you want to look for people who are going to make accommodations for you to help you get to where you're going and deal with your realness. Because at the end of the day, we all have real things and we all pull back the covers. Yeah. None of us are 100% perfect, right? We all have some shortcomings or something that's happened. And, so really kudos to you and bravo for making that space for him and allowing him to, make that new choice.
And if I can add to that is it the chicken or the egg that came first in this situation? Because what I also admire about him is he's pushy. Like, right, he came back and he's like, when are there going to be handrails for me to get up the stage? Right? Like we were in a space that wasn't our space. And I'm like, listen, I there's only so much I can do with this space because it's not ours. They won't let us do X, Y, and Z. So we're going to have to figure it out. But you got to be patient, man. Like I mean, this guy was like, he was advocating for himself, though. And so I got to wonder, did that come from the confidence he got from improv before the stroke?
Right.
And then getting through his ordeal, having that skill set to help him. And then he came back and then he was really motivated by, he wanted to be there and he was going to push and ask for what he wanted to be there. And not only was he healing through that process, but us working with him was teaching us.
Yes.
Teaching our team on how to do things differently and to make new choices in this new environment. So it goes hand in hand.
Yeah. It's more cyclical, more than the chicken and egg. It's really cyclical. So it's like they kind of come together, if you will.
Yeah.
On both sides. So that's really, really cool. Let me ask you, what's one way leaders can build more adaptive decision habits in their teams using this new choice effect model to improvise or improv when making decisions and just kind of taking what they have and moving forward?
I think where leaders could benefit from this the most is actually making a choice, sticking to the choice, trying the choice out for a while, and then making another choice. What I see happen a lot with leaders is, one, they don't always put a stake in the ground and they flip-flop. Like, okay, we're going to do this. And then they get pushed back. Okay, we're not going to do this. Right? These are the type of leaders that are trying to make everybody happy. And they can't get to a decision. They can't stick to a decision. And what I coach leaders on when I work with leaders like that, I'm like, let's just try this and see what happens.
Yeah.
But you can't go backwards. So let's go with, what's your first thought? Like, where's your head? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And I will literally new choice a leader when I'm coaching them and put them on the spot. Like, okay, go. Like, Gerald, what do you want?
Right.
And that disrupts the pattern of the brain. And so if you can get someone to play off of you with that, that would help you. And if you don't have someone willing to do that with you, do it to yourself. Like, Gina, what do you want right now? And put yourself on this new choice yourself constantly. I'm constantly saying, Gina, new choice, Gina, new choice, Gina. You talked about puppies earlier. And I want to talk about this because we just got puppies on top of everything, right?
Okay.
So we've got 2 Pomeranians. They are turning 7 months old this week. And the training of 2 puppies, right? I knew it would be a lot, but I didn't really know. I do want to talk about what I call, I don't know what I don't know, because I think there's a lot of value in that. So as we train the puppies, and I'm really training my husband how to train the puppies, right? So yesterday he says, they didn't eat their kibble. And I said, well, did you put it on top of the wet food? He's like, what? Since when do we put it on top of the wet food? I said, since yesterday. He's like, well, why didn't you tell me that? I'm like, I just experimented with it and it worked. So I just forgot to tell you about it. Right? Like it's a constantly trying new things in training these puppies. I'm like, okay, all the things I've read are not working. So I'm going to go try something else. So from a leadership standpoint, if what you're doing is not working and you've followed all the manuals and all your training and it's not working, sometimes people just feel like, I've done everything, so I give up. Versus, why don't I do something unconventional that's not in the box, that's not on the manual? Why don't I just do something completely different? Now, I do this exercise in training called Solve This or Problem Solved, where I make people solve problems with unusual objects. And they don't know that they're going to have to do that. I just say, let's talk about some of the problems that you're encountering right now. And then let's choose some to solve when we get into groups. And then I hand them a stack of objects like a pineapple and a hairbrush and a vacuum cleaner and a photo frame. And right. And they're like, what do we do with this? I'm like, solve the problem with the pineapple. And they look at me like I'm crazy.
But that's the whole science of improv, isn't it?
That's the whole science of improv, right? It is taking two impractical things and putting them together. It's this paradox of get out of your head of your same way of thinking.
Yeah.
You have to disrupt the brain and try something different that you've never tried.
You know, there's so much, again, there's so much for us to talk about here. I was just, besides that concept of the improv and the way you work with people, I was thinking about the time you coached me and we did it was the yes and, right? Because I would type something, blah, 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 but, or however, and it was like, no, you can't use but, or however, you have to use yes and, like, yes and what? And so now what's interesting is I find myself when I write and I put the word but, I go, nope, back up, yes and. And then I go, okay, now yes and what? So then I think through, and it comes across as more authentic or more positive or more engaging. It's not, not the excuse of, well, I tried this, but, or I tried this, however. It's, I tried this, yes, and this is what happened. And then I did this, and so it becomes a lot more solution oriented. And I think the idea of, the improv, right? Because now with all that's coming at us, right? Sometimes you don't have the resources that you were used to having. You talk a lot about that in your book where, going to college, right? You had to do a lot of different things to make it through college. You had to do things when you saw things happening in your first marriage that, you need to get the book and read it to find out. I'm telling you, it's juicy, but
it's juicy.
It really is. But you use that concept of, okay, I got a pineapple, I got an ironing board, I got a microwave, and I got to make something happen. And I got to do the MacGyver thing and get out of the woods and build a house with these items. But that is the beauty of improv, is that it forces us over and over and over to think differently so that when we are in a real situation,
yep,
we're in a real situation, we now have built a habit of thinking different and uniquely different about how to solve a problem. And we start looking for solutions more than just talking about the problem.
Yeah. And that game I told you about, I've been doing it for 20 years and I've done it in a variety of different ways in different environments, like with sales teams or with leadership teams or operations or customer service. And what I've always suggested to the leaders is keep a stack of objects written on index cards and put them in a jar. And when you get stuck, like, how do I solve this problem? Just pick one of those cards out, take a break, pick a card and say, I'm going to solve it with this tomato, and then ideate with that.
Yeah.
And just play with that, right? Play with it just to get your head into a different place. It's hard to do it because we're so conditioned to not do that anymore. And I talk about the Dr. Land NASA study of creative geniuses. And at the age of 5, 95% of these kids were creative genius. And by the time they're 15, it's only 12% of them, because it's beaten out of us to be creative, because creativity lends itself to problem solving and critical thinking. And a lot of times people don't put that together.
Yeah. I watched the movie the other day with my wife, Ferrari. I think it's called Ferrari, where they, I think it's Brad Pitt and a gentleman, African gentleman from London was in this movie. And, just the idea of that within 2 seconds, they changed, they come into the pit and they change all the tires. Right. And I was talking to my wife, I said, the medical industry used that model for surgery, that when a patient comes in, The doctor knows he has one job to do, the nurses know, the anesthesiologist knows, and so on. And I said, there's so many different industries. I think about FedEx, right? They use the monetary system of hub and spoke system to reinvent how packages were delivered. And so they use these concepts of improv. What most people don't realize is that Einstein was a violinist and he loved teaching violin. And a lot of that time of teaching put him in a much more creative mindset. And some of his greatest inventions when it comes to science was because he tapped into the improv side, right?
Exactly.
And so it makes a difference when we and I love this idea as a practical takeaway for anybody listening is to, hey, take out a couple of index cards, write down just various objects on it. And when you have a problem that you like, I don't know how to solve this, pull out an index card, and it may be a tomato. Maybe it's, hey, what is it about a tomato? Can I study a tomato? What's the science behind it? How are tomatoes used? What other things can people do with tomatoes? And just that alone may give you insight into, oh, you know what? If I use that concept of a tomato with this problem in AI, I may be able to come up with a solution that no one in the world would ever come up with because of that. And I think I shared with you earlier, I had this year of learning. And I use that model, which is, I did classes with, the Wharton School, University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, and Kellogg. And by the time I finished the year, I had 60 custom tools I built. I have 2 patents that I've submitted to the patent office as provisional patents that I'm building the applications. And I have a Fortune 500 that's investing in one of them. But the only way to do that is through improv. I had to take not just from one university, but from all the different spaces, and then using my background and this and that, and putting it all together, that these new ideas came out that I was able to run through a law firm and say, hey, is this really a valid new invention? They're like, yeah, these are 2 really cool things that we can patent. And so just like your book,
yeah, and I talk about this with improv performers too. Like one of my suggestions to them is know a little about a lot. Yeah. Because when you're on stage and you get a suggestion from the audience, you've got to be able to run with it, and you might know nothing about what they just said to you. Like I always use the example of hydroponics. The first time I heard of it was on stage as a suggestion, and I didn't know what it was. And I had to make something up, and the rest of my team helped me with that. But when you know a little about a lot and you're always seeking to learn, then you bring all these different worlds together. And speaking of AI, I did this fun little thing with AI because I want to write a blog about thought leadership. And what's the difference between thought leadership and influencers and point of view? And so I started playing around with that. And I said, what's a thought leader and who are thought leaders? And then I said, is Gina Trimarco Klauder a thought leader? And it came back with, it didn't know who I was, first of all, because it was Gemini and I hadn't been using Gemini for very long. And it came back with like, Gina Trimarco Klauder is definitely a thought leader. Her new book, The New Choice Effect. And it started telling me these things. And I'm like, why is she a thought leader? And it said, well, she's got this nuance of taking neuroscience and improv and crossing them together, which makes her unique with a different thought that nobody else has. And I'm like,
exactly.
Right. It's that was a really funny exercise to do, but it's how do you take from all kinds of worlds, from science and from art, from different, points of view and bring them together to ideate and create.
Yes, that is hilarious. And but that's amazing because then it validates you, right? Because now you're using an AI tool that like I haven't, customized it. I haven't tweaked it to know who I am. I haven't told it who I am. It's just going out and saying, okay, based on all these things that I've learned about her from my own, several research. And now as I put all this together, she is a thought leader. She's this and she's that. That is flat amazing.
That was hysterical.
I could talk to you all day about this stuff because, again, this is a real passion of mine, and you are a real dear friend, and that's why I wanted you on the show.
Thank
I
you.
wanted people to know about your new book, The New Choice Effect, and just the power that it really brings. I know you got a lot of reviews already. You'll get another one from myself here.
Thank
And I pray that a lot of people who are listening will also really gravitate and pick this book up, because especially going into 2026, we're going to need to make a lot of new choices. There's going to be a lot of new things going on, and having the new choice effect as a skill. So not think of it as a mindset, but also think of it as a skill. The new choice effect, that at any time I can go new choice and step back and come up with a slight variation to what I'm doing. And that might be the difference between a successful launch and a not so successful launch.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, for listeners facing, this analysis of paralysis, what is one thing they can take away from your book that can help them to start moving? Like you said, with the improv actors who are standing on stage, their bodies look like they want to move, but their feet are still. People who are finding themselves in that situation now with everything going on, they're overwhelmed by all the decisions they have to make. What's one thing they can do from your book to moving?
One thing they can do is to just make a choice and not overthink it. I would say, if you are facing, and just talking about the book real fast and how it's formatted, the way I formatted it, there's standalone chapters, right? So you can literally dial into, I'm struggling in this aspect of my life, family, or I'm struggling in my home life, or I'm struggling at work, right? You might be struggling with different things from a decision-making standpoint, and you can go to that chapter and do that. And I say, make one choice without overthinking, and just say, okay, what's on my heart? This is what I want to do. Ask yourself what you really think is the right answer. The reason why people get stuck with making choices, because I believe, is that they think there's only one right choice. And I purposely titled the subtitle, How to Make the Right Decisions, because I know that's what people want.
Right.
People want to know how to make the right decisions. Guess what? Every decision is a right decision, because it leads you to the next decision. And I start the book out with, make a decision and then make the decision right. So the one takeaway I would say is, just make a decision and don't think about it. Just pretend you hear Gina yelling at you, new choice. And you'll figure it out.
Yeah, again, because it's so you, right? It's so you and how you've lived your life, where you've had to start a new business, start a new life, buy a new home, and you go, okay, that's the choice. Now let's figure out how to make the choice right. I don't know how I'm going to get the money, but we're going to make the choice and the money will come. And sometimes the universe doesn't move for us until we move. It's kind of like a GPS. If you're parked and the GPS is saying, searching for signal, sometimes you just got to go in a direction and it'll reroute you.
I didn't even think about that story. I didn't put that one in the book, where I really lost GPS in the middle of Indiana, going to a women's prison to teach improv. A true story. And I was lost in the middle of farmland, and a state trooper had to help me, almost arresting me. But that's another story for another time.
Well, Gina, that means I have to have you back on.
Yes.
Because there's a lot into your book. There's a lot for us to talk about. I'm really glad we were able to reconnect again and have you on. And again, for those who are listening, please pick up a copy of The New Choice Effect for the new year, because it will give you a mindset and a skill set to be able to pivot no matter what happens in your life, no matter what's going on. It'll give you that mindset to be able to pivot in 2026 and make the choice, and then make the choice right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for having me.
You're welcome, Janet. If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community.
Thank you again for your support and for listening to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.